Bumps diggity rum hum. I got a little Bone Thugs to start it off. This is Lion and Zion coming at you. I wanted to get on the mic and spit some stuff as it's in me, and I wanted to share some thoughts with you, some important ones that I believe. Basically, I've been watching some stuff, some episodes, some debates, and I wanted to share some important ideas that you need to have in your mind when you go into these debates. As you watch some of these university students, some of these intellectuals or so-called intellectuals, uh, you're seeing the ideological possession. You're seeing their inability to be able to actually integrate what the other side is saying, or integrate the images or the videos or the GoPros that show the jihadi war crimes on display, the statistical analysis coming from multiple sides of of the issue that shows, one side is hiding and using populations as human shields and then exploiting them as PR drones, and the other side doing everything they can to minimize the civilian casualties, despite the other side's cynical usage of human shields. You have, a very low um, casualty to rate of civilian to terrorist, and you have the other side just parroting the same line of genocide, 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 um, and war crimes, war crimes, war crimes, and it makes you think, what would it take to be able to change these people's minds? And you realize very quickly that there's very little that you can do. It's the way the mind virus works. Gal Saad, a Canadian Lebanese psychologist who wrote The Parasitic Mind, he said something interesting in one of his interviews about how one of the human phenomena that he finds very interesting when he observes is the inability for someone to observe something in real time, see the result of something over and over again, result in the same way or a mistaken way, and not be able to change their mind. Um, I agree. It's very difficult sometimes to swallow to see such a hardened and coarse intellect not be able to integrate very, very, let's say, common sense or in your face evidence. Um, and so for me, I realized quickly, because it's a bit disheartening when you see, Mossab Hussein Youssef and hostage sitting next to a UCLA student, and that UCLA student just like, blank, like just like eyes glazed over and just saying the line over again. It's like, what will it take? And then you realize you can't change that person's mind. It's about managing your expectations. About a bit of intellectual triage is required. When you're sitting in the debate with these people, you're not trying to change their minds. What you're trying to do is expose their ignorance, expose their bigotry, expose their ideological possession, so that they become uh, an instrument for what they are. They're a prop. They're a useful idiot. Show them for what they are. Showcase it. Put it on the windowsill. Let everybody see it. That's the best you can do. And that begins first with exposing the level of discussion you're going to be able to have with these people. Any debate basically is reduced to what the lowest denominator, or the I would say the lowest denominator within that debate. So if you're going to talk about, targeted assassinations and how, if that's legitimate or not, that's ridiculous if the person doesn't even believe that the country that's, using that tactic has no right to exist at all. Meaning your discourse has to be shaped to where that person is. So I recommend, whenever you're talking to the Israel bashers, the Jew haters, it's very important to start your conversation with questions, not the witty answer, but the insightful question. And I usually like to start with five questions that I think reveals the actor for what it is, and it'll allow you to have, the discussions downstream from those questions. So number one, is being Jewish a religion and an ethnicity? Number two, was Jerusalem sacred to Jews for thousands and thousands and thousands of years? Were two temples basically sitting and being built, Hebrew temples built on Jerusalem? Three, did the Holocaust result in 6 million Jews being murdered, um, between 1939 and 1945. Fourth, does Israel have a right to exist as a Jewish state? 5, is Zionism racism? Those 5 questions, however that person answers, is going to tell you very much where that person sits. Do they deny Jewish identity? Do they deny Jewish history? Do they deny Jewish suffering? Do they deny the ability of Jewish people to be self-determined? Do they believe the rights that being a Jewish self-determination by its very definition is racist? These are all very, these are what I call exposure questions. So once you get those answers, you understand what the level of the conversation you have. I think that beyond that, there's 2 or 3 other questions that I think become very important, which is become hijacked, which is linguistic hijacking of the language for political ends. We've talked about this before, but apartheid, what does that mean? Racism, what does that mean? Colonialism, what does that mean? Nation state, what does that mean? Ethnicity, what does that mean? They've taken all these words and they've basically defined them in such a ridiculous manner that they don't really connect to how these words were used for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years, centuries. And they've made them so like wishy-washy that they have real no meaning. And so it's important when you're having that discussion to know that as well. So when you talk about, Israel's not an apartheid because apartheid was based on a racial system of segregation and there are Ethiopian Jews, well, they could say, well, that's not what racism, apartheid means. Yeah, what's racism? I thought racism about race and a hierarchy of races and one being better than the other. No, it's a question of power. It's dynamics of power. These are, postmodern, Marxian definitions that are there to basically invert the conversation, and then you'd be called out. And then what the problem really becomes is that, and it's sad, but you realize that discussion is very hard when you can't even agree on the basic language of communication. But in the very least, that has been exposed. It's been disrobed. We're talking about completely different worldviews, epistemologies that are completely clashing. And that's really what the problem is, right? So you're having much higher upstream conversations so that you don't get boggled into, there was no such thing as a nation state 500 years ago. So ethnicities regarding nation states don't matter. Well, the argument to that would obviously be, and we're getting a little into the weeds, is that the Jews were basically the first nation state, right? We were the microcosm, of what the nation state would become. We had limited borders. We had defined. We had defined our identity very early on, and what that meant to be a Jew. We had limited government and a Sanhedrin and a king and the king, and basically you could say a constitutional monarchy, right? Because the king had to write the Torah twice, had to study it, and had to read it in front of the people, and that's Jewish law. And so you had a first constitutional monarchy, you had a limited government with defined borders, with a defined identity. But we're going a little bit more into the weeds here, but that's my point. You can have those kinds of targeted conversations once you understand where the other person sits. So I just want to share that with you. Hope that was edifying. Speak soon.